Well, welcome back, everybody, to Talks with Avenger. Okay, in all seriousness, I want to talk a little about balance today. I had this idea, if I can pull this picture up here, and the idea is about it's about the balance triangle. So somebody in chat on one of the previous streams was talking about the idea of balance, and I know there's been some crazy stuff going around in the Star Citizen community when it comes to the Ion and just the whole game balance in general, right? So I'm going to attempt to explain my interpretation of balance in the game, where CIG is going with it, and why that potentially is a good thing, and what people kind of need to wrap their expectations around when it comes to understanding that ships fall into specific roles and positions in the overall grand scheme of things, and how that's a healthy thing for the game, and to kind of help quell this idea that I think we all know, and that is this idea of, well, I paid this much for my ships, so therefore it should just be the king of the ships, right? I think that's dangerous, and I think we need to understand it from a little bit more of a nuanced perspective, right? So, you know, I don't want to step on too many people's toes today. I don't want to upset anybody. That's not my intention. I understand that people have paid a lot of money for some of these ships. This is just my opinion, so you can cancel me after the video, but just sit through it and let me let me explain what I'm talking about here. So I was very lucky to have a good friend of mine, Aristan, who is able to put together a very nice picture that I had drew on stream, but it did a much better job. So it'll be right here. So you'll see that this triangle here is in 3 parts: top, bottom right, bottom left, and also each triangle is separated into its own kind of mini subdivisions, right? So let's just think about this from a zoomed out perspective, because we know that Pyro system's coming in soon, right? So there's going to be a lot of enterprising individuals looking to make a buck, right? Now, when it comes to the grand scheme of things, you know, I visualize myself this style of balance. And I think from what I've gathered from CIG, from what I've seen from the way they've been balancing things and the way they're looking at things, my interpretation or my prediction is this is the kind of style that they're going for. And I think this is a really good thing. Really good. Okay, so let's kind of break it down. So you have 3 general classes. You have your bombers or attack ships. You have your capital class ships. So that's, you know, your Javelins, your Polarises, your Perseus, you know, your 890 jumps, that kind of stuff, right? Then you have your fighters, again, light, mediums, and heavies. And then you have the whole battle group as itself, right? And logistics is its own thing. Now, this is specifically for combat, guys, right? So when it comes to a military tactical situation, these are the attributes of it. Logistics is its own thing. That, of course, has a massive impact on the whole general tactical situation of logistics with fuel, missile deployment, extra fighters, repair, rearm, refuel, all that stuff, right? But in terms of the tactical battlefield situation, let's say you roll up as the squadron commander to a situation where you have X amount of ships. How are you going to win that battle, right? Well, you need to understand the edges of different ships, right? So in this world, I see this as the light, medium, and heavy fighters. Their primary role is to be basically bomber killers, right? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't effectively take damage off of capitals. It doesn't mean that you can't shoot them. You're going to be able to shoot them. You're going to be able to do some damage, of course, stripping turrets off, stuff like that. But in general, if you want to effectively kill capital ships, you're going to need bombers. You're going to need your gladiator bombers. You're going to need your eclipse bombers, your retaliators. You're going to need your ions and infernos. Like, you're going to need your heavy DPS, heavy, you know, alpha weapon style bombers, right? Now, if we look at this theoretically, now we're going to do a little imagination today. And I want you to just kind of visualize a tactical situation in your head. Take Xenothreat, for example, right? We have the Javelin show up. There's 3 Idrises engaging, right? Now, again, there's a sub-balance category when it comes to capitals versus each other. So obviously a Javelin versus a Frigate. Frigate's probably going to be at a slight disadvantage depending on what's going on with the Helms officer on each ship, if he's going to bring the Javelin close, if he's even going to get close, if the railguns on the Idrises are at a good enough range to do some damage. Who knows, right? The point is capitals have the edge against another category, and that category is fighters, right? So what I think when the PDCs come online, so interception of incoming missiles, or flak screens, that kind of stuff. Capitals are really going to be a class of ships in the game that won't necessarily be at any tremendous risk from a gang of gladiuses or a gang of arrows, and that is a good thing. That is a very good thing, because you don't want a bunch of hotshot jockeys like me and all my friends, you know, who've been training for fucking God knows how long, just running up there, running 10 arrows on people and just killing javelins with 10 arrows. I mean, it's not healthy for the game. As much as I would love to do that, you know, I've always said this from the beginning. I want a healthy experience. I want Star Citizen to be the game that it's meant to be. And in order to do that, ships have to fall into good categories, right? So capitals, not necessarily too afraid of fighters, but capitals versus fighters, the fighters are going to be at a disadvantage. Okay, because they have to deal with the flak screens, they have to deal with the increased shields, the armor on capital ships, which might negate almost entirely, like entire damage pools from fighters. Fighters have to deal with obviously running out of fuel. They can't stay airborne for forever, whereas the capital ships are most likely going to be, you know, operational for quite a long time, right? So you have to deal with that. Obviously, the small low health pool, all it takes is a few shots from a capital ship and, you know, there goes your fighter. So fighters relatively ineffective versus the large capital ships. Again, doesn't mean that a gang of arrows can't effectively do some damage to, for example, maybe the smaller capital ships like the Polarises or the what's the other one? I'm gonna brain fart. Polaris and the one with the big gun on it. Polaris. Do I have to Google this? Whatever the other ship is with the big gun. It'll come back to me again. Polaris and something else. Starts with a P, I'm pretty sure. Anyway. You know, these, and obviously the frigates, and we have the Drake Kraken coming in, that kind of stuff, right? So capitals, they're their own category. They balance against each other. So you might say that frigates are good against destroyers, or destroyers are good against frigates. Corvettes, something like hammerheads, are really good against the frigates, or maybe the other way around. Corvettes might be really good against destroyers. And again, right, corvettes should fall in that category of being particularly good against light fighters and medium fighters and just fighters in general, and maybe not being so effective against maybe the bigger capital ships, but they still fall into that kind of capital category, right? They might be the smallest of the capital category, just how like light fighters are the smallest of the fighters category, right? There's a balanced triangle within that structure, right? We get into fighters now. Fighters obviously not being the best choice for engaging large capital ships, but in the fighter category, you have the lights, mediums, and heavies. Lights obviously being great against heavy fighters because they're smaller. They can attack in groups. They have the DPS to get through the shields. You know, it might take a little longer, but, you know, a light fighter swarm might be very effective against heavy fighters. Heavy fighters being obviously a larger target, whatever, they're going to be effective against mediums because mediums might be just a bit too slow to get away from the heavies, that kind of stuff, right? But right now, as it currently states, you know, in 3.16, medium fighters are kind of in a weird spot. They don't really have much going for them. So the mediums aren't really good against light fighters, and they're not exactly good against heavies, right? So in the meta balance of the fighter category, mediums need some love, but that's why we do this, right? That's why we update the game. That's why we work on it. That's why we keep, you know, adding new things, and you guys know the drill, right? I'm sure Yogi knows this and the team knows this, and they'll keep working on it. So out of the fighters category, you go into bombers. Now this is where it gets interesting, because your bombers are your gladiators, your eclipse style stealth bombers, your retaliators, like that kind of stuff, right? And the way I see it is an effective team is going to be able to utilize the fighters and the bombers effectively in a coordinated group so that the fighter screen can protect the bombers from an enemy fighter screen. Because if the enemy fighter screen, so think about it this way, if an enemy group comes in without one of these 3 categories of ships, they will be at a disadvantage. If they don't come in with bombers, think about this. If they don't come in with bombers, they're going to be at a definite decline in their ability to take out the larger vessels. So if you just come in with fighters and a cap ship, you might be at a bit of a struggle. It might be really hard for you to effectively engage like an enemy Idris or Javelin, that kind of stuff, right? But if the enemy team comes in with bombers, your capital ship is going to be at serious risk. So the job for you then, as the commander, and this is going up for all the organizations out there that have, PvP groups that are getting formed. So I'm speaking directly to whoever's leadership. Like if you're part of an organization and you're in charge of a group, you need to understand that you have to look out for your different categories and you need to prioritize what's the biggest threat, right? So if they come in with their light fighter screen, 2, 3, 4 fighters, who knows how many, and they got a bunch of bombers, like you got to take those bombers out, because if you let those bombers go through, you're losing capital ships. End of story, right? So it's interesting to see the dynamic between things, and I think some people kind of get lost in the weeds where they say, oh, like the Ares Ion, it's so bad now. And look, we can argue all day about how bad the balance pass was for the Ares. But what I agree with CIG with is that the Ares needed to have something done to it. Because if nothing was done to the Ares, then it would be basically, not only would it be a solid bomber in the bomber category, considering it's an attack ship, but it also is a solid heavy fighter. So it does it does 2 categories. So it disbalances the kind of triangle of PvP / enjoyment. You know what I mean? Because if it does too much in one category and it bleeds into another category, people are going to just start using that ship over and over again, right? So I did make a video talking about how I would have balanced the Ares Ion to make it feel more like an attack craft, to make it not effective against fighters, but also give you that feeling of like this heavy fighter with this big size 7 gun on it, and to give it a rewarding experience to like swoop in, bang, bang, get some shots, and then fly out, come back around. I think that the balance pass on the Ares was a little bit knee-jerk. They kind of just threw it under the bus real quick. Even though it was necessary to balance the ship, it was a bit heavy-handed the way they did it, in my opinion. Taking the fixed assist away and all the other stuff, it's just like, okay, I mean, the gun's offset now, so now it feels terrible. So, I would have no offense, CIG, but I would have put the gun center lined at the very least. I mean, like, for God's sake, it's a giant size 7 gun. You can't have that thing sitting center line, just have the pilot sit on top of the gun or whatever. I guess, anyway. And then obviously we go back into the capitals where the bombers are at risk of getting damaged from the bombers, right? The capitals, right? So that's pretty much it, guys. I just wanted to go into detail, just talk about how I conceptualize the game's balance. And it looks like CIG is moving more towards this idea of like ships in categories, and then the ships in those categories balance off against each other's plus and minuses to both, right? So in the bombers category, you have like ships that are purebred only bombers, right? You have like the Eclipse, which is the more stealth oriented bomber but less payload, the Retaliator, which is all bomber all the time, just like give me the torpedoes and let it happen. And then you have obviously your Ares, which is a more gunnery focused kind of attack ship. So again, capitals, you have your frigates, you have your corvettes, you have your destroyers, and then eventually we'll have our battleships, cruisers, and stuff like that, right? So it's going to be really exciting. It's going to be really, really exciting. I'm very excited with where CIG wants to go with this, right? So this is the discussion that I think the entire Star Citizen community should be involved in. I've been a big proponent of like kind of trying to get people involved when it comes to understanding the balance. Again, you don't have to agree with my opinion. That's not why I'm here, right? I just want to have an authentic discussion without going onto Spectrum and just having people throw hate at each other. I think from what we've learned in the world in general right now is that we're not going to be able to come together as a community if we don't have good, meaningful, productive discussions together. And the way to do that, I think, is to do it through video form like this, where we have a much better understanding of what point is getting pushed across, and then have good, logical, effective discussions in comments, but mostly get people together on Discord and have discussions in real time. I think talking to people is always the best way. So if you have an option to type it out, or you have an option to come into Discord and have a discussion and be like, well, this is what I look at this and blah, 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 that's a good thing, right? And if you're not interested at all, that's good too. I just want you to be aware and informed that ships are in different categories. So when balance comes down and ships start getting pushed, so let's see, like the Ion, for example, right? I always use the Ion because it's kicking the dead horse, but people played that ship and played it like a fighter, and then when they moved it from the fighter category into the bomber category, essentially, then people got really upset because they don't understand what SIG's trying to do here. The Ion and the Inferno are attack fighter. They're attack ships. I think they did themselves a bit of a disservice when they called it the Ion, that Star Fighter, right? So it's just my opinion, guys. Anyway, good image. I think it kind of wraps up how I conceptualize combat and PvP and just the nature of balance and stuff. And we'll see what CIG does in the future with balance and stuff like that, right, guys? So I hope you guys have a great day, rest of your day. Thank you for watching. This was just my opinion. It's a good little discussion. Sit down. It's an easy video to make, and it's nice to get you guys involved. I was Avenger1, and I'll see you next time.